The ballroom at the upscale hotel in Midtown Manhattan was packed well before the event's official start time. Rows of chairs lined the plush carpet, every seat claimed by a journalist, influencer, or political commentator. Cameras stood on tripods, their red lights blinking steadily as eager techs did final checks on audio and lighting. Soft chatter filled the space, an undercurrent of excitement mixed with tension because everyone there knew Donald Trump was about to address the room. And whenever Trump held court, especially in the aftermath of one of his signature controversies, it was guaranteed to be a show worth covering. He adjusted the mic as murmurs of, "Good evening, Mr. Trump," floated up from the front row. He offered a nod in return, then leaned in, speaking with that signature confidence everyone recognized. "I appreciate you all coming here tonight. We've got a lot to discuss, a whole lot, so let's get right to it." His eyes flicked across the crowd, taking in the faces that had turned up to see him. There were those he recognized, journalists who'd followed his career and controversies for years, and others who were newer to the scene, brandishing social media credentials rather than official press passes. Regardless, they all stared back at him, recorders in hand, hoping for that next big soundbite. Before anyone could lob the first question, he pulled out a folded paper from inside his jacket. The movement caused a collective small gasp. Trump was known for going off the cuff, rarely reading from prepared remarks. For him to pull out notes? That signaled something important. He spread the paper on the podium, cleared his throat, then spoke. "I'm launching a new initiative," he said, his voice filling the room. "Some of you may have heard rumors. The truth is, I've decided to start a platform focusing on real American businesses. It's going to be called Rebuild and Renew. And let me tell you, folks, it'll be incredible. We'll highlight companies doing amazing work, we'll hold events to connect them with investors, and we'll show the world what real American entrepreneurship looks like. This country was built on innovation, on big risks, on people who refuse to give up. We're going to bring that spirit back in a very big way." He paused just long enough for the words to land. A few journalists typed rapidly on their keyboards, capturing every syllable. In the second row, a younger reporter raised his hand, and Trump nodded, allowing the question. "Sir, that's an interesting announcement. But how do you respond to those who say that your recent legal troubles might overshadow any new venture you try to launch?" The reporter's tone was careful, neither overtly hostile nor deferential. But the question made the front rows perk up in anticipation. This was the spicy angle the press had been waiting for. Trump smiled, but there was a tightness around his eyes that signaled tension. "I'm glad you asked," he replied, leaning closer to the mic. "First, I have no legal troubles. I have nonsense. Nonsense created by politically motivated prosecutors who can't stand that I actually accomplished things when I was in office. So they come after me with these phony investigations, these baseless claims that eat up airtime. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. And believe me, I'll be vindicated, just like I always am. Meanwhile, America is hurting. Gas prices are up, morale is down, and we're losing our edge to foreign competitors. That's what I'm focusing on. That's why I'm doing Rebuild and Renew. Because we need to focus on real issues, not made-up controversies." Another voice called out from the other side of the room, a woman with short-cropped hair and a steely gaze. "Mr. Trump, with respect, many legal analysts say you're facing potential charges. Are you worried at all? Especially about allegations surrounding your previous business dealings?" Trump's eyes narrowed, but he kept his expression composed. "The only thing I'm worried about," he said, "is that the media runs with these allegations without verifying facts. Over and over again, I see headlines that paint me as guilty of something without a shred of evidence. But you know what? They tried that for years while I was in office. Russia hoax, impeachment nonsense, both times, by the way. All noise, no substance. And guess what? I'm still here, stronger than ever. Because the American people see right through it." The tension in the room climbed a notch. A few people shifted in their seats. The watchers in the corners, the quiet ones who seldom ask questions, scribbled notes capturing every barb. Cameras whirred as they zoomed, ensuring they missed nothing in Trump's facial expressions. He scanned the crowd, then continued. "I'd like to focus on this new initiative tonight, but I'm sure you'll keep hitting me with questions about my personal life, my taxes, hush money, whatever's trending. Go ahead. Let's clear it all up so we can talk about the things that really matter to this country." A flurry of hands shot up. The moderator, a tall, thin man with impeccably parted hair, attempted to maintain order by pointing to a middle-aged reporter in a crisp navy suit. The man wasted no time. "Mr. Trump, since you brought it up, let's address the hush money allegations. There are claims that Trump lifted a hand in a gesture demanding patience. Look, I know the claims. They're ridiculous. It's just another attempt to smear me. Let me ask you something. Doesn't it bother you that politicians in D.C. can funnel millions to overseas accounts? They can get caught in corruption scandals that cost taxpayers billions, and somehow nobody bats an eye. Yet if I allegedly wrote a check to keep some personal matter private, something common in business, by the way, suddenly it's the crime of the century? Don't you see the double standard? A few members of the press pursed their lips. Some nodded, either in agreement or acknowledgement of the argument's rhetorical power. Others simply typed, refusing to betray their personal stance. Trump's voice grew more impassioned. And you know why they do it? Because I'm an outsider. I never played by their rules. I said the system was rigged, and I tried to fix it. They hated me for it, and they've never stopped hating. So they latch onto these stories. They run them nonstop, hoping to create a narrative that'll stick. But the American public is smarter than that. He paused just long enough for another question to slip through. A man in casual attire, a blogger from a prominent political website, raised his voice. But sir, some would say you incited division during your tenure. Look at the controversies surrounding your rally speeches, your tweets. Don't you think you bear some responsibility for how polarized the country became? Trump exhaled audibly, gripping the sides of the podium. Polarized? The country was polarized long before I ever rode that escalator down Trump Tower to announce my campaign. Remember the gridlock during previous administrations? The culture wars? The media might try to pin it all on me, but believe me, I'm just the messenger. I said out loud what millions of Americans were feeling but were too afraid to express. If telling the truth divides people, maybe the problem is that we've been fed too many lies for too long. In the back, an older journalist cleared her throat, ready to wade into deeper waters. You say you told the truth. Some have accused you of spreading misinformation on election integrity, on public health issues, on foreign policy. Are you saying you stand by all those statements, even the ones that experts have refuted? Trump's jaw visibly tightened, but his response was swift. Experts, so-called experts, can be wrong. They can be politically biased, they can be incompetent, or they can just be plain crooked. History is full of examples. For instance, experts told us about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That turned out well, didn't it? Experts told us the economy was healthy before the 2008 crash. Experts said 100 different things that turned out false. So pardon me if I don't bow down to someone just because they wear the expert label. I trust my instincts, I trust the facts I've seen, and I trust the American people to figure out what's real and what's not. A hush settled over the crowd. This was classic Trump, combative, unwavering, unafraid to question the establishment. But something in his demeanor suggested he had more to say, something bigger. He adjusted his tie, then scanned the gathered press once again. Let's move on, he finally said. I'll take a few more questions, then I want to tell you the real reason I called this press conference. He pointed at a woman in the front row who was practically standing in excitement. She introduced herself as a reporter from a popular entertainment news network. He gave her the floor. Mr. Trump, you've always been known for your outspoken style. Recently on social media, you made some comments about certain celebrities who criticized you. You called them names. She glanced at her notepad. Let's see, you called them washed-up failures and said they should mind their own business. Do you think this kind of rhetoric undermines your credibility when you talk about wanting to unite the country or help small businesses? Trump shrugged. I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. Some of these celebrities made a career off my name. When they insult me, the press covers it, and they get the spotlight they crave. Meanwhile, they're not accomplishing anything of value. If they're going to take shots at me, they need to expect I'll fire back. That's how I've always been, and I'm not changing. The reporter pressed, but doesn't that alienate potential supporters? People who might otherwise listen to you about business or politics, but are turned off by the insults? He shook his head. Look, I get along great with many people in Hollywood, believe it or not. But the ones who trash me, I have every right to defend myself. My supporters respect that I'm not a pushover, that I don't back down. They know I'm not going to fold just because some actor or singer says something nasty about me. We have freedom of speech in this country, and that goes both ways. Another flurry of camera flashes. The environment crackled with an electric tension, fueled by reporters eager to push him into a corner. Yet he seemed more than willing to bat back every question. Finally, the moderator tried to step in, reminding everyone that the event had a scheduled end time. Trump, ignoring the attempt to wrap up, Tap the microphone for attention. All right, folks, let's talk about what I really want to announce. Yes, there's rebuild and renew, but there's more. I'm also considering another run for the White House. Now, before you jump to conclusions, I haven't made a final decision. But if I do run, it'll be for one reason only: to finish what I started, to ensure that the policies that made this country strong come back in a major way. The taxes, the trade deals, the border, issues that the current administration is mishandling at every turn. The room collectively held its breath. Although rumors of a potential run had circulated, hearing him say it out loud stirred a frenzy. A few reporters tried speaking over each other, voices colliding in the air. The moderator repeatedly asked for order. Trump raised a hand, commanding silence. "If I run," he said slowly, "you can bet the media will explode. They'll dig up every piece of dirt, every rumor. They'll talk about my taxes again. Maybe they'll find some new angle to accuse me of something. Let them. The American people remember the results we had: lower unemployment, strong borders, a booming stock market. They remember who was delivering for them and who was not. And that's what matters." He paused just long enough for the audience to process his words. Then he straightened his shoulders, ready for the onslaught. Hands shot up across the room. The next question came rapid fire from a known left-leaning media outlet. "Mr. Trump, many blame you for the events of January 6th, calling it an insurrection you incited. How would you address that if you run again?" His eyes flashed with unmistakable anger. "I've addressed it 100 times. I told people to protest peacefully. The ones who broke the law should be held accountable, absolutely. But it wasn't this grand coup the media keeps harping about. It was a protest that got out of hand, and I condemned the violence immediately. Anyone who says otherwise is pushing a narrative to demonize me and my supporters. Believe me, if my people wanted an insurrection, they wouldn't have just walked around taking selfies in the Capitol." A handful of reporters exchanged glances, registering the bluntness of his statement. He forged on. "The real story of January 6th is how the media weaponized it to silence tens of millions of Americans who felt cheated, who felt their voices weren't heard. That day was used to label half the country as domestic terrorists, and that's a disgrace." The reporter tried to follow up, but Trump shook his head. No, we're not staying on this all night. I know what you want, some outburst you can loop on cable news. Next question." A reporter from a major network took the mic. "Sir, you talk a lot about faith in your speeches, and many evangelical voters supported you. However, some have criticized your personal life as being at odds with conservative Christian values. How do you respond to that apparent contradiction?" Trump folded his arms across his chest. "Contradiction? Look, I'm not perfect, never claimed to be. But I respect the church, I respect the Bible, and I respect people who live by their faith. My personal life has been scrutinized more than maybe any person in the world. And guess what? I still have millions of faithful supporters who appreciate that I fight for religious freedom, that I appointed judges who respect life, that I defend the right of Christians and all believers to practice their faith without persecution. Actions matter more than a spotless personal record." The reporter's expression remained neutral, but he jotted notes, perhaps planning to highlight or dissect that quote in post-coverage. Trump pressed on, addressing the entire room again. "America was built on Judeo-Christian principles, and I'm not afraid to say that. Some folks act like it's taboo or hateful to say we value those principles. It's not hateful to want strong families, strong morals, and strong values. It's what made this country great to begin with." He let the statement linger, letting journalists scramble to parse every angle. Then he tapped the podium. "That's enough for the quanda portion. I want to speak directly to the American people, and you can write this down or broadcast it however you like." He locked eyes with the cameras. "Our nation is at a crossroads. We can continue letting the media, the career politicians, and the bureaucrats run the show, or we can take back control of our future. If I decide to run again, it'll be because I believe the American dream isn't dead. It's just being suffocated by bad leadership and corruption. And I plan to do something about it, whether the media likes it or not, whether the establishment likes it or not." He paused, then gave a slight nod, as if concluding. The moderator approached the podium, about to dismiss everyone, when a voice rose from the back of the room, a deeper, more confrontational voice that had been biding its time. "Mr. Trump," it called, "one last question if you'll allow it." He glanced over, debating. The crowd parted, revealing a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses who many recognized as a known gotcha reporter, often penning scathing critiques. Trump raised a brow. Go ahead, make it quick. The reporter strode forward, notebook in hand. You've spoken about returning to office, about your new initiative, and about controversies you claim are fabricated. But let's talk about your critics who say you've polarized the country beyond repair, that your rhetoric, particularly on social issues, has inflamed tensions. They point to racially charged remarks and hostility toward immigrants as proof that your leadership is inherently divisive. What do you say to them? A collective hush fell, heavier than before. The journalist sat up, anticipating an explosive response. Trump inhaled, then leaned over the mic. I say this. I love this country, every part of it, every race, every background, every faith. When I talk about immigrants, I'm talking about the need for a secure border, about law and order, about prioritizing legal entry and assimilation. That's common sense, not racism. When I talk about radical groups or violent criminals, I call them out, regardless of their background. This country has laws for a reason. Enforce them. That's not divisive. That's what keeps our communities safe. The ones who twist my words into some hateful agenda are either dishonest or willfully ignorant. Because the truth is, if you look at how the economy thrived when I was president, job growth among minorities was at record highs, wages were rising for all. That's actual progress, not empty talk. The reporter didn't relent. But you used terms like, Trump waved him off. I know the terms you mean. Shithole countries, all that. When I spoke bluntly about some places, I was referring to their corrupt governments, the lack of basic infrastructure, the devastation their people face. It wasn't an insult to the people, it was an indictment of their leadership. But the media spins it into something else. Meanwhile, no one addresses why those places are broken to begin with. A few in the crowd looked uneasy, others scribbled down every word, anticipating the fiery headlines that would emerge. Trump's posture remained solid, unwavering. You want to talk about division? He continued, voice rising slightly. I'd say the media, the political elite, the race baiters, they're the divisive ones, constantly telling us we can't get along, that America is hopelessly racist, that we should be ashamed of our history. It's nonsense. America is the greatest country on earth with problems like any other, but fixable problems if we come together. But you can't come together if you label half the country as deplorable or irredeemable. Remember that word? That wasn't my word, that was from the other side. He let the silence hang, then offered a curt nod. That's all I'm saying on it tonight. The reporter opened his mouth as if to push further, but Trump pointed to the moderator. The moderator took the cue to step in, thanking everyone for attending. The official portion of the press conference was over. Camera crews began dismantling gear, while journalists rushed to file their stories before any competitor could break the narrative. A hum of excited conversation rippled across the ballroom, everyone analyzing Trump's bombshell hints at another run, his new initiative, and his combative defense against every accusation thrown his way. But the story didn't end there. Within minutes, video clips began circulating on social media. Trump's most controversial statements were clipped out and retweeted with captions either praising him as a fearless truth-teller or condemning him as a demagogue. Cable news stations cut to expert panels dissecting his every word. Some hosts predicted he was on the verge of political suicide, while others insisted he'd never been stronger. Late-night comedians got their monologues ready, mocking the entire spectacle as yet another Trump circus. Behind closed doors, however, the conversation was very different. Senior figures at the new Rebuild and Renew initiative huddled in a suite upstairs, analyzing how the press conference would affect their launch. Some worried the controversies would overshadow the philanthropic veneer. Others believed that controversy was exactly what fueled Trump's brand. Positive or negative, it kept the spotlight on him, and therefore on them. Meanwhile, top GOP insiders texted each other furiously, trying to gauge if a second Trump run would unify or fracture the party. Some saw him as the unstoppable juggernaut who could sweep primaries, while others feared he would drag them into another cycle of chaotic headlines. Across the aisle, Democrats and liberal commentators seized on his statements, calling them proof that Trump's divisiveness remained a threat to national unity. A few hours later, as the crowd dispersed, Trump lingered in a small side room set up as a makeshift green room. One of his closest aides offered him a bottle of water, but he declined. He was on the phone, of course. His calls came in a steady stream. Supportive friends, concerned allies, curious donors. His phone buzzed nonstop with messages from big names, senators, foreign dignitaries, and longtime business associates. A soft knock on the door interrupted him. An assistant popped in, whispering, "Sir, there's a man here. You said you'd give him 5 minutes if you could." Trump nodded, wrapping up his call and motioning for the man to enter. The visitor was an older gentleman wearing a wrinkled suit, carrying the air of someone who'd been in politics for decades. He introduced himself as a local party official from a pivotal state. He looked visibly uneasy, clutching a folder under his arm. "Mr. Trump," he said, voice trembling slightly, "thanks for seeing me. I came because people in my state are nervous about another run. They're worried about the fallout, the January 6th talk, the legal issues, the divisive rhetoric. We want to support a conservative movement, but—" Trump raised a hand. "Let me guess, you're here to convince me not to run?" The man hesitated. "Not exactly, sir. But we're concerned. The last time, well, it got messy." Trump lowered himself into a chair, gesturing for the man to sit as well. "Politics is messy. That's the nature of the game. But let me ask you this. Do you think the issues that put me in office the first time are gone? Have the voters changed their minds about wanting secure borders, a strong economy, pride in their country?" The man blinked. "No, sir. Those issues are still there. But the environment feels more hostile now, more polarized. And the left is going to come at you with everything they have." Trump chuckled, a sound that was half amusement, half exasperation. "What else is new? They've been coming at me since I walked onto the political stage. But you tell your people this. If I run, it'll be because I believe I can win and deliver results. If they want to be part of that, great. If not, they can sit on the sidelines." The man shifted, hands wringing together. "Understood, sir. It's just, we need unity in the party to stand a chance against the Democrats." Trump's gaze was unwavering. "They'll unify behind a winner, trust me. If I run and show I can bring the base back, they'll come around. They always do." The official exhaled, then nodded. "Thank you for your time. I'll report back." When he left, Trump allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. It was true that the environment felt even more charged than before, that every statement he made was dissected to an absurd degree. Yet he thrived on this kind of energy. He believed conflict revealed truth, that a peaceful status quo only masked underlying fractures. And so, as the night wore on and staffers packed up, he remained certain that the wave of controversy his press conference generated would only stoke the flames of his movement, a movement that refused to die simply because critics demanded it. Over the next several days, news outlets feasted on the press conference. The hush money question and January 6th exchange dominated headlines. Pundits debated the moral implications of another Trump candidacy. Some insisted democracy itself was in peril if he returned. Others claimed democracy thrived on robust debate and that silencing Trump was the real danger. Polls popped up, some showing him surprisingly strong among GOP voters, others suggesting moderate voters were fatigued by his tumultuous style. Online, the partisan echo chambers roared. Hashtags trended, competing narratives clashed. One side brandished sound bites about making America great again. The other side posted clips of his most incendiary remarks, labeling him a menace to civil discourse. Amid this cacophony, his new Rebuild and Renew initiative quietly took its first steps. Trump's team announced a set of pilot projects, grants for small manufacturing companies in the Rust Belt, mentorship programs for aspiring entrepreneurs, plans for a cross-country roadshow featuring local business success stories. A promotional video was released, with glimpses of Trump touring factories and shaking hands with workers, all set to patriotic music. The tagline, "Together, we rebuild. Together, we renew." Critics scoffed, calling it a transparent PR stunt meant to launder Trump's image before another campaign. Supporters hailed it as proof he cared about the heart of America. The man himself shrugged off the commentary, pressing forward. He'd seen firsthand how controversies overshadowed substance. But he also knew controversies kept the cameras rolling, and he could slip in his message while everyone watched. Then came another bombshell that turned everything on its head. A high-profile media personality, once fiercely anti-Trump, reached out to book him for a primetime interview. Rumor was the host wanted to challenge him hard, but also give him room to speak. Sensing an opportunity, Trump agreed. The media braced for fireworks. The interview took place in a sleek TV studio, all polished floors and strategically placed screens. The host, known for her biting commentary and progressive leanings, greeted him politely. They sat across from each other under bright lights while a silent crew manned cameras. The opening pleasantries were brief, overshadowed by the sense that both parties were there to do battle. "So, Mr. Trump," the host began, "we've heard about your new initiative, your possible run. But let's talk about the past. You've made statements that have offended women, minorities, and entire nations. Do you regret any of it?" Trump, sitting tall, offered a half smile. I don't do regrets. I do results. Did some people get offended? Sure. But did we get an economy that benefited everyone? Yes, we did. Yet you lost the last election, she countered. Isn't that proof enough that people had enough of your style? He leaned in. I question how honest that election was, but let's assume for a moment it was legitimate. Even then, I received more votes than any sitting president in history. That's not had enough. That's tens of millions of Americans who still believed in the message. She pressed further, hitting on issues of racism, sexism, the hush money scandal, the Capitol riot. And each time Trump parried with a mix of denial, deflection, and a reframing of facts. The tension soared. Even the camera operators seemed on edge. Then she lobbed a personal question. You talk about faith and tradition, but your personal history, multiple marriages, allegations of affairs, seems to contradict the moral stance you claim to champion. How do you square that circle? He gave a short chuckle, folding his hands. I've never claimed to be a saint, but I do respect family and faith. My personal failings don't negate my policies or my leadership. People understand that I'm flawed, like everyone else, but at least I fight for them. And do you truly believe your vision of America includes everyone? She prodded. Because some say you only represent a certain demographic. White, conservative, older. Trump bristled. That's media spin. Under my administration, minority unemployment hit record lows. Wages went up for African Americans, Hispanics, and women. That's not a certain demographic. That's everyone. She didn't back down, but neither did he. By the time the interview ended, the studio crackled with spent energy. It would go down as one of the most watched broadcasts of the month, catapulting Trump's statements back into the spotlight. Social media erupted again, dissecting every claim, every retort.